Strategies, the world's biggest Bitcoin bank. Ponzi scheme exposed. You know, people often say that Strategy is a Ponzi scheme, that they rely on new investors to pay off old investors on their preferred stocks, but that's not the entire story. A real Ponzi has no legitimate business model and no underlying asset generating value. It depends entirely on fresh money coming in just to keep the illusion alive. Strategy isn't that. They actually use investor capital to buy Bitcoin, a scarce appreciating asset, and that's where their capital gains come from. As Bitcoin's value increases over time, the company's balance sheet strengthens. But let's clarify something important. While Strategy's document states that yields on their preferred stocks like STRF and STRC are considered return of capital rather than dividends, meaning they shouldn't be taxed as income, the reality for non-US investors is a bit different. For example, UK investors holding STRF through IBKR. I actually experienced a 15% US withholding tax. I received a payment of $2.50 from one share of STRF, but 38 cents of withholding tax. That's 15% of the payout they took. Compare this to traditional dividend-paying companies like AT&T or Coca-Cola. They pay dividends out of profits, which are always taxable. Strategy, on the other hand, simply returns a small portion of your own capital to pay yields, which in theory shouldn't trigger any US withholding tax for non-US residents. Even though it's just returning your own money, the US still takes 15% automatically for foreign investors. But regardless, Strategy's preferred stocks still offers higher yields than most company dividends because they're backed by Bitcoin. This is more attractive for investors simply looking for higher yields, even if some withholding tax applies. Now, if you're using a general investment account, you'll still have to pay capital gains tax on your profits, but with STRC, the share price typically stays below $100, so it behaves more like a high-yield savings account than a growth stock. You're earning consistent income instead of chasing price appreciation. If you're after growth, Strategy also offers preferred shares like Stride, STRF, Strike, and Stream, which is a new preferred stock that will be available in the European markets. They still pay quarterly yields, but with more upside potential as Bitcoin grows. For UK investors though, the most tax-efficient and safest way to hold Strategy's preferred stocks is through an ISA. And good news, Interactive Brokers actually allows you to hold these within your ISA, meaning both your yields and capital gains can grow completely tax-free. Except the US withholding tax, obviously. Now when you think about it, if people call Strategy a Ponzi scheme just because it relies on new investors to fund yields, then by that logic, every major bank is a Ponzi scheme too. Banks like HSBC or Bank of America rely on new deposits from people to fund investors. They take your savings, promise you a small yield, and then use your money to buy assets or issue loans to people at higher interest rate. That's literally how banks make money. This is called fractional reserve lending. When you deposit your money in a bank, it's no longer your money, it becomes the bank's liability. They will mortgage out your savings to a bunch of landlords, the very same landlord who will increase your rent next year while inflate asset prices. Do you really want to live in an economy that constantly inflate house prices and make every essential thing expensive for the poor and middle class? What happens when there's no new deposits coming into the bank? Because at least with strategy, they don't lend your money, they convert your funds into Bitcoin, the hardest form of money humanity has ever seen. Instead of debasing your wealth through inflation, they preserve it in a fixed supply asset. And as long as Bitcoin grows 30% per year, they can sustainably pay those yields on their preferred stocks. They can pay you 10% yield on stretch. So if anything, strategy is not a Ponzi, it's the anti-bank. Traditional banks are the biggest Ponzi schemes here because they create money out of thin air by loaning your savings to bond investors, landlords, corporations, and governments. Strategy is building what will likely become the world's first and largest Bitcoin bank. And they're doing it all legally, transparently, and strategically with one mission: to preserve shareholder value in an age where fiat money is melting away. If you learned something of value, I'd appreciate you leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.